Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we navigate the messy, beautiful work of healing and growth. I'm your host, Carrie Fund, and this is your space to breathe, reflect, and find strength. Whether you're breaking free from old patterns, healing from loss, or rebuilding your story one small step at a time, you're in the right place. So take a deep breath, give yourself this time, and let's uncover the tools to move forward with courage. This podcast is for you. Today's guest on Surviving Roots is Camille Zuck, a woman stepping into a mission that feels bigger than a business and bigger than a niche. It's a lifeline for people trying to break free from narcissistic partners while protecting their finances, safeguarding their children, and rebuilding their sense of self. Camille is the creator of the Breaking Free Project, a structured and compassionate space built for clarity, strategy, and emotional safety. For years, people quietly came to her during their hardest moment of their lives, and she became the person they trusted when everything felt impossible. With a background in business and finance, plus training in narcissistic abuse recovery, domestic violence advocacy, and behavior profiling, Camille brings something rare, a real-world strategy and deep empathy without pretending to be a therapist. And fun fact, we've actually met 2 years ago over coffee, and an hour wasn't nearly enough. So today we finally get to finish that conversation. Welcome, Camille.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carrie.
I'm so excited to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm wonderful. You've been busy, lady. You've been doing a lot of amazing things. So I just want to dive in.
Okay, excellent.
So breaking free is the heart of your project, but it's also such a personal phrase. What does breaking free mean to you?
So it was pretty obvious to me that that would be the name because there were a handful of names we went through, but that just explains so much with just those words. Breaking free really is breaking free from toxic relationships, people, situations, maybe environments, and just stepping forward into your own personal freedom. So I love the name. I think it's perfect for what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the issues and these toxic dynamics are so complex to begin with. So I love the name. It's clear, it's concise, and you can't misunderstand it.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, you're a mother, so this work is heavy. It's emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. How do you keep your mission from consuming your daily life? Like, how do you separate the work from your own family and well-being?
So I think the biggest thing that I've worked on over really the last decade for myself and of course my family is boundaries. And so, whether it's professional boundaries because you're dealing with clients that want to contact you at all times of day and night when things are happening, to also personal boundaries, how you're just going to kind of like, whether it is you say a prayer before you go into a session or you do some type of spiritual cleansing after a session. There's a number of ways that I'll use to protect myself. And it's always boundaries.
It's always boundaries. Boundaries are
Yes.
they're so important. Like on the scale of 1 to 10, where do you think they rate in terms of importance with like the first things to do when dealing with a toxic person?
Got 11 because if you have them, if you think about it, if you have them, then you won't even get into these situations as far as most people do,
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
So let's walk us through this with everyone listening. When people come to you for that first moment, they're scared, they're confused, even financially vulnerable. What's the first thing you do to help them untangle?
So usually people in the beginning, especially when maybe they realize what they're dealing with, maybe they haven't so much, but they are emotionally distraught. So it's really hard to do something logically when you're super emotional, right? So what we kind of try to do is just let's practice on separating the two. So your emotional self is over here where you're going to grieve and you're going to cry and you're going to experience all the horrible emotions that go along with this. And that we really want them to be working with a therapist on. But over here, we're going to work with you on the more logical side and creating that strategic plan to exit safely. And if you can't get out of the emotional brain while you're doing it, and you're probably going to make 1,000,001 mistakes and usually give yourself up and expose what your plan is. So that's like the number one step is really to get them to calm, take some breath, get control of themselves, and then to logically focus on putting these steps together that are going to help them to escape.
I love that. But you mentioned two important words. It's really calm and control. When you're dealing with people like not like toxic people, it's hard. You're almost as reactive as they are. You lose your sense of calmness. You lose complete control. So even I have learned, like even when taking that moment, whether it's 5 seconds or 50 minutes, like that silence and getting into that state of calm, that's where your power is, man. I mean, you literally, if you can just connect the dots in your mind and think clearly for a second and pause, and they don't want you to do that because they got you right where you want you when you're frazzled and out of control. I love that you say that, calm and control. Well, what are the earliest red flags of narcissistic dynamics? Because most people miss it until it's too late. In my experience, you sort of just think this is the way things are. You don't even really realize what you're dealing with. And I don't think it's ever maybe too late. I think, but it just depends. I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, it would depend on how enmeshed you are as far as like
Yeah.
lateness is concerned. So I'll tell you kind of from a spousal situation. Like this is maybe a romantic partner, someone you're interested in. You can usually see it on the first date, first interaction. And I love this because for years I have posted on social media just showing people like little quotes, things about narcissism. And I've had so many friends reach out to me, go, "Oh my God, thank God that you were posting those things," because they'll tell me about a guy or a girl or someone that they immediately ceased, communications with because they saw all these behaviors immediately. So it does work if you know it. And a few of the most important things you see immediately will be mirroring. So narcissists survive on mirroring. So they're literally mirroring yourself back to you. And we like people that are like us because it's just easy to communicate with them. So if you're on a first date and you're talking about how you love books, you read all the time, you're in a book club, and the person on the other side is like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. So am I." And it's like, "What? That's incredible." And then of course you move on and now you start talking about some other stuff and there are just too many similarities. And here you are thinking, "Oh my God, I met my soulmate." But in reality, you're just being mirrored. And I've even actually had it happen to myself where on a date many years ago, this guy mimicked my laugh because I had a kind of some nervous laughter. And so I had my little nervous laughter. And within 2 seconds, he's copying me and doing the exact same thing. And I thought, "Oh, cute. That's something I would do." Not recognizing, wait a minute, the guy's just mirroring me. And after a certain number of encounters with this person, they were immediately cut off. But that was something that I didn't know about at the time until I really understood narcissism. And it's such a huge red flag in the very beginning. And the other thing I would say in the very beginning is moving too fast. So after the first dinner with this person, then I was asked, "Well, you know what? I got to take a business trip to Europe. Why don't you come with me? Because you're into fashion and you could go to fashion week while I'm in my meetings." And I'm thinking, it just doesn't feel comfortable at all. So of course I said no, because it didn't feel comfortable for me because I didn't know this person. But moving too fast, too quickly is another huge red flag. And then later, if you're dealing with any other relationship and the person refuses to accept the word no, that's probably the biggest red flag that you're dealing with somebody that's very narcissistic because they will retaliate, come back with threats. I mean, they absolutely cannot tolerate the word no. And that's your sign that you need to exit that relationship.
Wow, these are so good. I've had chills since you started with number one. I had no idea about the mirroring. That is so interesting. Oh my gosh. So
Yep, it's a real thing.
can you just repeat the three things one more time for everyone listening? Number one was mirroring.
Mirroring, too fast, too soon, moving really fast, and then can't accept the word no.
Ooh, okay. Those are little power pieces, people, to tuck into your pockets. And so let's say someone's listening right now and they're like, my God, they're processing all of this right now. What do you say to them?
I say just get educated on the subject because, it's sad in today's world and of course in different cities, it's bigger in certain countries, certain cultures, narcissism is actually huge. In many instances, pathology has been winning in the last few years. It's been something that it seems to get worse and worse and worse. People, their kids follow their Kardashians. They've got Hollywood raising their children. It's not actually supporting the values that most of the families and parents that I personally know really want. So if they don't understand the behaviors, sometimes they may support relationships their children have with people who really kind of have those values. And it's not necessarily a good thing because obviously we want to really work with the children and manage ourselves as adults so that we can then teach the children the right way. I feel like it's a huge epidemic. It's probably one of the biggest ones in the world that we deal with. And really it continues to thrive because people are just not educated on the subject.
Wow, that is so important. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now. I know that there's people out there calling some of this narcissistic abuse depending on if it's between parents and children or spouses, but they're big on calling it trends now. And I'm like, huh, I'm wondering if they would have, if these are the same people that would have called like the Me Too movement trends, like people finding a voice and collectively coming together to connect in their pain and their healing. Like
Right.
that's really toxic culture if you're calling that a trend.
Exactly.
It's
Not a trend.
terrible. It's
Yeah.
it's not a trend. It's just really cheap, lazy marketing to sell whatever they're selling.
Great way to minimize it, you know?
I mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
almost makes me it makes me question, I don't know, I guess themselves. Um, so financial protection is a top priority in your analytics. What are the biggest mistakes people make when trying to leave a narcissistic spouse?
So the number one thing when you're planning on leaving, this is what we teach in our course, is that you have to do things secretly. You cannot alert your abuser, your narcissistic spouse that you're planning to go. You're going to leave them. You're going to file for divorce. Because if you do, they're going to beat you to it because these people have to save face and external world is a lot more important to them than you. So that's probably the biggest place that people really mess up because normal range and normally securely attached people believe that when there is an issue, they can go and speak to someone about it. They can resolve it between themselves and out of court, which is usually what we all do. But when you're dealing with someone that's narcissistic and you mention to them something that's going to cause them to feel rejected, you're going to trigger that narcissistic injury and they're going to retaliate. And literally, the manipulation, it's unbelievable the stories that I've heard and the things I've witnessed myself that these people will do to sabotage someone that has rejected them. So you have to keep it quiet. That's number one most important thing.
Okay. On a side note, in your opinion, like, I'm always so confused by this. Do narcissists know that they're narcissists, or are they just like they actually believe what they're saying? I'm so confused by this because I mean, I don't consider myself on the crazy train, so I'm just wondering, like, do they know what they're doing and they don't care, or they are completely oblivious to their actions and their choices?
So, you think about it. If you're living a life of lies, there's a lot to keep up with. It's exhausting. And that's really what they do because they've created that false self and they're just pathological liars, sadly. But from everything I have learned, there's research that shows that yes, they do know what they're doing. And that's one reason why if you catch them off guard or you show up with all this evidence and a really a pattern of abuse, coercive control, and domestic violence in court, then you can prove, look, this person knew exactly what they're doing. All of this is happening in the privacy of our home. In public, they act like they're, a queen or king, or they're just a perfect husband or parent or whatever. So yes, they know what they're doing. I've also seen arguments that maybe they don't necessarily understand that they're narcissistic. And I could believe that because that's how they were usually raised. And so it is very rare that one would seek out help and try to reverse their narcissism, but apparently there are cases of it. But in my experience, I haven't seen any of that.
It's so interesting. You mentioned court, and I want to talk about like evidence and documentation being crucial, but you just said something that made me think, how does someone become a narcissist? Like, I mean, how do people raise their kids and they become narcissists?
It can happen many ways, but the two most popular ways that it can happen is if they're completely neglected. So for example, they're neglected by their parents because the parents are busy, they work all the time. In order to compensate for the guilt the parents feel for not being there for the child, maybe they just spoil them. They give them way too much. So not only are they neglected, not getting the proper parenting and boundaries and all of those things, but they're also being given way too much for really nothing. And so usually then that creates entitlement and all of the other behaviors that you see in narcissism. And then you also have on the other side of that, where you have just maybe the parent is there and they're super controlling, but you have a lot of permissive parenting where they are being allowed to make adult decisions. Protective boundaries are not being set around them. They're only maybe rewarded or, given good compliments from their parents and shown love when they're doing something the parent wants them to do or pleasing the parent. So, there's a couple different ways it can happen. Those seem to be the two most popular.
Wow. Okay, that's so insightful. Okay, so I want to get back to this evidence documentation being crucial because you did mention court. Like, what is the right way to begin documenting safely and strategically? And is this with like spouses? Who does this apply to?
Honestly, I would apply it to anyone. If you think that the situation is going to get kind of out of hand at one point and you're going to try to exit, then as soon as crazy things start happening, that's the best time to document because a lot of times survivors get stuck in these relationships because of the gaslighting and the manipulation. And there's all this cognitive dissonance. Like, they always end up thinking that they have to blame themselves because if they were better, maybe my spouse wouldn't act that way. Right. And so they always usually internalize it and blame themselves. But if they start documenting, like for example, there's a disagreement and the narcissistic spouse punches a wall and there's a hole in the wall and their children were at home and present. If you document that and you get pictures and you start documenting as if you were going to be presenting it to the court or to CPS or one of these agencies, then you start to create that logical chain of events where you can then start going, well, wait a minute, no matter how you're feeling emotionally, here's the facts of what's happening in my situation. And this is really dangerous and this is not healthy for yourself or for your children. So I say start documenting as soon as really crazy stuff starts happening. And usually it happens pretty fast in these situations.
Yeah. It's you everything that you're saying, I for some reason my mind keeps going to like all of these movies where like they make these like intense like romantic movies and I'm thinking all these male characters are narcissists. Why do women love these movies so much?
It's like, well, narcissists live in a fantasy, right? It's like an idealized version of themselves in this world that's not really existing. And sometimes those fantasies we can buy into because they sound so nice, like a romantic love story. That's why if they sweep you off their feet and they do the whole love bombing thing at the beginning and intimacy bombing and all these things, it's like this whole false sense of having real true intimacy with this person. And it sucks you right in because you're like, oh my God, this is a fairy tale. And it really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's two really good shows I always tell people to watch and learn about narcissism and then watch Dirty John on Netflix with Christian Slater.
Okay.
That's a real story, true crime story. And he
I'm
plays
writing
the
these
part
down.
very well.
Okay.
And then the other movie is Gone Girl with Ben Affleck because the book was actually written about a woman on the cluster B. She had a cluster B personality, which includes narcissism, and it's just fascinating when you understand it, and then you go back and watch it. They really highlight everything in the movie.
Yeah, I love that book and movie.
Yep.
Well, you've supported so many people privately for years. What made you to decide, like, what made you to just finally create the Breaking Free project?
So sadly, I wanted to do something for a while and I did have a website and it wasn't really until I went to a funeral of a dear friend of mine who I didn't know was going through this. He did tell me, years ago about the divorce, but I didn't know it had continued over and over and over. And ultimately he took his own life because of it. And so when I lost him, and then I had another guy, male friend, that did the same thing. And people were explaining to me later what was going on. I was really heartbroken because, I mean, like, they both had my number. I was here. I could have helped. And so when I see really good people feel like there's just no way out, and they were already divorced, and the crazy making continues really, until the children are 18 and sometimes longer. I was like, there's got to be a resource out there for people so that they don't end up, just thinking it's not possible to get through it alive.
Wow. I'm so happy to hear that you are doing what you're doing and helping so many people. That's truly heartbreaking. I mean, even after a divorce, that's crazy. You finally, you do somewhat think you break free, but the abuse still continues. And I guess I could picture how someone might feel like they can just never escape that.
Yeah, that's why you really have to be able to manage that, the emotional side and the logical side and stay in that logical brain when you're dealing with them because, really the behavior is designed. What the narcissist really wants is for you to just get rid of yourself because then they've won because everything's a competition. And the whole point of it is winning at any cost.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to operate logically with these people.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that abuse looks like many things. Like people, I know from the things that I talk about, people will say, like with your estrangement, well, unless your parents beat you. And I'm like, emotional and mental abuse are like death by a thousand cuts. Like,
Exactly.
it's amazing what people tell themselves when they're like, trolling other people. But I think it's very important that abuse takes on many forms. And just because you can't see things doesn't mean it's not harming someone.
And honestly, people don't realize that the actual definition of domestic violence doesn't just include physical violence. It's basically you take the definition of narcissism and the behaviors you're going to see, and that's also the definition of domestic violence. So you could grow up in that and as a child with narcissistic parents and not even realize that. And that's something that the court actually recognizes. So that's part of what we teach in the course when it comes to creating your strategy to where a court will recognize it, because you can't say narcissism, but you can say coercive control, domestic violence. Those things are usually illegal. Patterns of that are illegal in many states. And so you are able to kind of bring awareness to the court. And these words need to be shared more because people need to recognize it's not just narcissistic abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's often a moment when someone realizes this isn't me, this is the dynamic. How does that moment usually show up?
So it doesn't usually show up until they've educated themselves on narcissism. A lot of people that have already gotten out of the situation and don't understand that that's what they're dealing with, then they're just going mad in the legal system because they're getting re traumatized after the divorce. And it isn't until someone either wakes them up and says, you know what, I think this is what you're dealing with, or maybe they get a psychological evaluation in court. And then all of a sudden there's a diagnosis they can read. Usually that's the waking up point for people. It's like an aha moment where it's like, oh my God, the entire time, this is what I was dealing with and I didn't know it. And usually that's when they can kind of snap out of it and stop blaming themselves. But then the blame turns into guilt for marrying that person, bringing children into the world with that person. So there's a lot to work on, emotionally when you go through this process.
And all of the shame that's attached to it. Like, it's almost like, I don't know, I think it's so hard sometimes to admit things are happening because you're embarrassed, but so much to unravel there.
Absolutely.
From a behavioral profiling perspective, what keeps people psychologically stuck in these relationships? Like, what would finally breaks the spell? Is it like people could be telling you these things? I know people that have been told for years, like, I think that person's abusive, or I think, but what really clicks? Is it like a lack of self-worth? Is it a lack of what someone truly deserves? Like, what is that thing that really breaks the spell to where they're like, okay, I'm going to get help, or I'm going to leave, or
So when you're profiling someone, you would typically, and of course narcissists do this very well because they typically attach onto people who are empathetic, who are very loyal, maybe loyal to a fault, but who also have very weak boundaries and will allow them to get away with a lot of just inappropriate behavior, which usually is from the start. And so most of the time, these people that are victims of narcissists have their own inner work. And that's why your podcast is so wonderful, because usually they're bringing these perceived, thoughts about themselves from childhood based on how they were raised or who parented them or what they were told about themselves. And then maybe they hate themselves in some way, or maybe they've just got these certain things about themselves that have caused them to believe this is what life is like, or relationships are like, or maybe I just can't get better because I'm just no good. So usually it's something that they have within themselves. And I would say they have to usually go through a series of the cycles of this relationship before they're just worn out. And they say, survivors, it takes them sometimes 6, 7, 8 times trying to leave before they actually leave for good. So, I mean, that pattern can go on for 20 years. But once they learn about the cycles of narcissistic abuse or the cycles of the narcissistic relationship, which we teach them on our website, then they can kind of wake up and see that, hey, you know what? It's never going to end. This is just how it is. The abuse doesn't change and get better. And then usually when they reach their final point, and like I said, everybody's different, but that can be 10, 20 years for some people. Then they'll finally decide to get out of it. And some people do it in retirement. I mean, I've known people to go all the way to retirement before they get the divorce. And it's like,
wow.
wow, you just spent your entire life, and that's a really difficult life to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Wow.
knowledge is key.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, when you said 20 years, my situation is with parental narcissism, but my estrangement didn't happen till the age of 31. So I tried for decades, which led me to have to do a lot extra healing because I waited so long. But, shame keeps you silent. It's embarrassing, and nobody wants to sort of orphan themselves off from their parents. So it's very scary, but now looking back, I mean, I was just driving the other day in the car and I got teary. And it's so interesting. If that would have been me 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have probably been from a painful moment. But honestly, I had my kids laughing in the back. I just got them from school and I literally got teary because I think it was the holidays and I have so much joy and so much peace. And I literally get emotional now because of the happiness and the joy that I have in my life, not the pain. So it does get better. It's a lot of work. But I always say to people, you can either live in pain or you can heal and live in peace. Either way, it's a lot of work. What do you want your end goal to be? So
Absolutely.
I
It's
love
all a
everything.
choice.
Yeah, it really is a choice. And just like our parents or a abusive partner or a toxic friend, we become the choices that we make. And just like we have the choice to heal and become better, so do they. So
Absolutely.
it takes two to tango.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree.
Well, everything you're doing is so important. I really want to ask you this because I grew up with two narcissistic parents. Co-parenting with a narcissist is a very different universe. And what is your most essential advice for protecting a child's emotional reality if someone is going through this?
This has got to be the hardest part of it because when children are involved, of course, as a stable parent, someone who genuinely really loves them, this is probably the most painful thing to watch your child go through. So I think number one, establishing the boundaries at your house, you're going to have to parallel parent. You can't co-parent with the narcissist, right? So you have your own rules and boundaries and things that you put in place at your house to protect your children, right? And then those things just stay the same and you just manage and maintain a routine for those kids so that you can at least they know what to expect at your house. They're not on pins and needles. They know they can come, let their hair down, relax, and they can just be themselves there. And at the other parent's house, whatever happens over there is on them, right? So they'll learn eventually that things are, one way here and one way over here. And, unfortunately, you will have, frequent problems from when they are coming from the narcissistic parent's home where they're super toxic and they've got to take a couple days to de-stress and detox at your house and dump the garbage out on you. And that's really painful too. But what is really great is if you can maintain some sense of normalcy and emotional closeness with the child, like doing things that you guys always love to do together, some hobby of the child that you can do with them kind of on a regular basis, just to kind of keep that emotional closeness, not involving them in the divorce matters, not really reacting to the negativity that they bring back and just asking questions, being more curious about it and giving them the ability to just talk more. Talking in itself really helps to heal. And of course, seeking therapy when the child needs. And I think every child in the situation needs therapy with the right therapist that understands narcissistic abuse. Look, just giving them the amount of, unconditional love that they're not getting at the other house. That's like the most important thing you can do for your child.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really wanted to start this interview off with like really diving deep into everything, like just the dynamics of this, because knowledge really is power. So I would really like to now get into the Breaking Free Project. How does this work? If someone's listening to this podcast, they hear the Breaking Free Project, they need your help, or they just want to learn more, what do they do?
So what they would do is go to our website, which is breakingfreeproject.com. And on the website, we have a number of tools or resources that they can use. But I would first say definitely take the quiz because the quiz is free. You can apply it to your relationship. That's how you're going to be able to determine if you're experiencing narcissistic behavior from your spouse. There's also a free worksheet that they can use, which is a little bit more in depth than the quiz that actually will go through the relationship cycle that you would have with a narcissistic person. And they can go through each question and then circle different behaviors that they're experiencing. And they're usually going to have something under each, part of the cycle. You usually experience all of it in a relationship with a narcissist because this is just how they act. Once they do that, then if they, whatever their situation is, if they're already working with a therapist, if they've already decided, okay, this is it, I'm going to exit, break free, then we can work simultaneously with them, their therapist, their lawyer, whatever their team is, and do the strategic freedom method with them, kind of hold their hand through the process and basically help them to create the safe plan to exit. But like I said, it's all done really in secrecy where they're doing this. And it takes months sometimes to get prepared because you're doing things like getting your financial documents ready, making sure that you have another account for yourself where you're putting some extra money away on a monthly basis, getting all of your medical documents ready, getting your children's stuff ready. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to get ready when you're going to be, exiting a household. And so it takes time. But our course is very short and can be done in one day because we know people are very busy with their children and work and just life. So at least they can watch the videos, go through everything in a day, and then they can spend the time putting their plan together and creating that safe exit strategy. Because for us, the number one most important thing is safety. There are stats, that if someone's in a domestically violent situation, that the murders that after they leave occur within 7 days of them leaving. So some of these are very, very bad situations, and the person has to make sure that they can get out and go to a safe location, whether it's a shelter, domestic violence place, somewhere where they're not going to be able to be found and they're protected before they say this is over. So that's kind of the strategy. They start with just going to our website, using the free resources to kind of understand this narcissistic personality a little more. And then they determine if they're going to exit. And then, of course, we even have a thing on there where you can alert a friend anonymously. So if you think a friend is in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic and you want to alert them anonymously because you can't say it, otherwise you may lose that friendship, then you can have the website send them basically anonymous email that's just going to say, hey, what do you know
Wow.
about narcissism? Are you in a narcissistic relationship? And then it's just going to educate them on what it looks like. It's going to give them the cycle and then send them back to the website so they can learn more.
Wow, Camille, that is an amazing piece of tool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, that came because so many people, not only survivors were reaching out, but of course, family members would reach out. People would reach out and say, oh my God, this is my son-in-law or my daughter-in-law or my mother-in-law or, all these different people that they feel helpless because they cannot wake up their loved one to see what relationship they're in. And if you do that, then most of the time they cut you out. And so that's a huge risk. So doing it anonymously is pretty much the only way.
Wow. I mean, the Breaking Free Project, say your website again, breakingfreeproject.com.
Breaking Free.
For everyone listening, if this episode applies to you or you're not really sure how to proceed, or if it does, take the quiz. I mean, how long does the quiz take? Few minutes. Take the quiz. If you're already wondering, that's probably a hint to go onto the website and take the quiz. I want to thank you for today. This episode is full of insights and knowledge. Just the first thing is educating yourself as the first step. And I want to thank you for being here, for your time, and for your sharing, and for creating the Breaking Free Project.
Thank you so much. I love what you're doing, Carrie. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Camille. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Surviving Roots. I hope it gave you something meaningful to carry with you. Let's keep this conversation going. Find me on Instagram at carrie.fund, where I'll share more from the show. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs it. And remember, we are the choices that we make.